Hey guys, what's up? I'm going to talk about being a good person. Not always important to me, but most of my adult life anyway has been really important to me. But come on, let me in, you. But my success has been rather mixed. So, Seventh Day Adventist preacher's kid, and if I ever did anything wrong, it would just get reported. If I said the swear word bloody, it would get reported. If I was deceptive, if I played with matches, if I lit fires, it was reported. So growing up in the Seventh Day Adventist college community of Avondale College, I was pretty much under the microscope because my dad was the chair of the religion department. And so I do anything wrong, gets reported. If I was disruptive in Sabbath school, it would get reported. And my car's running sweet now since I got everything fixed. Yeah, I've been inspired by Monique Bibler's Drive to Work series, and I'm concerned that he's getting an increasing number of views, increasing number of subscribers, and so I got to step up to the plate and not let this guy outcompete me. So, growing up, preacher's kid, growing up, Desmond Ford's kid. Growing up, Avondale College, Seventh Day Adventist community, where being ethical and decent and a good person is very important. So, Seventh Day Adventists tend to be nurturing people. It's one of those rare religions that's essentially founded by a woman. It was founded by Ellen G. White. She was a prophetess. She wrote about 70 books, many of them highly plagiarized. Like she wrote books called Desire of Ages and Messages to Young People, and she died around 1920 at about age 90. And Seventh-day Adventists tend to be nurturing. They tend to be good people. This woman next to me would not give an inch. Would not give an inch. Okay. Aggressive driving here in LA. So yeah, I remember I got pulled aside by my father one afternoon when I was a kid because there were reports that when I go to Sabbath school, I'd kind of take a running start into Sabbath school and then just slide on the floor, and that I was disruptive, I guess hyperverbal, talk too much. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a Christian minister. Yeah, road rage stream's going to be the next big thing. I wanted to be a Christian missionary. I wanted to go to India and to darkest Africa and convert people to Christianity. And to prepare for that, I would sleep on the floor in my father's library to kind of harden up for the tough conditions that awaited me when I became a Christian missionary. And I thought, yeah, being a missionary, that's what my father would want, that's what God would want, that's like the most awesome thing you can possibly do. But at the same time, I was reading a ton of history books, and so I was inspired by the stories of people like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, and I saw Anglo-Saxons as having this divine mission to bring the world to first world civilization, to a higher way of living. And I saw Anglo-Saxons as God's chosen people. And in the Australia I was growing up in, I was born in 1966, the country was about 95% white. The first non-whites didn't start legally immigrating to Australia and just a trickle in the mid to late 60s, mainly just to study. Then it was Gough Whitlam in 1972 who officially did away with the White Australia policy. So we had a few non-whites at Avondale College, but it was overwhelmingly a white college. And my father was a minister, and he would go around and break up any mixed race couples because he saw that as being against God's will. He also broke up my brother. When my brother was about 14, he had a girlfriend, and my father marched over to her house and broke it up. It wasn't really the Christian way. You shouldn't get involved so young. My dad was against dating. He thought you should just get married when you're an adult and you're able to support a family. So I tried to get away with everything I could get away with, and I would steal money from my parents to buy candy, and I became skilled at leading a double life. I believe that kids as young as 18 months become good at deceiving their parents, and so by 4 or 5 I was probably deliberately telling lies, and telling lies became second nature, because if I told the truth I would often get hit. And so I just got really good at telling lies, and then I'd feel bad about it, and usually late at night I'd feel bad, and I'd go traipsing into my stepmother's room and confess my sins. My parents raised me with the saying, "Be sure your sins will find you out." And so I had this idea that my sins would always catch me out. And so I'd develop a bad conscience, and I'd confess my sins such as stealing money to buy candy, eating candy between meals, big sin, Seventh Day Adventism, looking at books related to sex that my parents owned, not raunchy books, not porn books. These were scholarly books about hormones and the way the body works. But I was sneaking glances at these books. Gerard Perry, I feel like I'm watching a Quentin Tarantino film whenever Luke does one of his outdoor videos. Kill Bill 2. But I got good at lying, and I got good at leading a double life, so that I could essentially do whatever I wanted as long as my parents didn't find out. So in high school, I'd tell my parents on Friday nights I was going to a Bible study, when instead I was sneaking away to the local basketball game to cover it for the Auburn Journal, and I was also the editor of my high school newspaper. And I remember I was my high school's bookie, and my next lines, and then my mother would say, "What's for college?" And I said, "Yeah, that was for college." So as I moved through my teens, I was very much more into my ambition than being a good person. And when my father got kicked out of the Seventh Day Adventist Church when I was 14, at least out of its employ as a minister, I started going to public school for the first time as a sophomore, and being in that secular environment, it rubbed off on me. I became less religious. And so by the time I was 18 and left home, I went to live with my brother in Australia. And for the first few months, I would go to the Seventh Day Adventist Church. But my brother was secular and an atheist. And eventually I got a job that required me to work on the Sabbath. And so I gave it and became an atheistic communist. And I did not put a huge primo in acting ethically, and yet I had a good reputation overall. People would say that I was an ethical person. It was the consequence of being raised a preacher's kid, and they'd say that I'd go far in life when I got things figured out. But I was pretty selfish. I was volatile, and then my illness hit me. My chronic fatigue syndrome hit me, and I had to figure out a new way to live, because until chronic fatigue hit me at 22, my life was all about fulfilling my personal ambitions. Decided I wanted to be an economics professor. I'd been accepted into UCLA's economics program, and UCLA had a very good reputation for an econ program. It's the University of Chicago of the West. It was a libertarian approach to economics, and I thought, I'm going to go to UCLA undergrad and then go to London School of Economics or Oxford for my PhD. But then I got sick, and so I could no longer just pursue my ambitions because I was too weak. And so I had to find meaning for my life. And that's when I discovered Dennis Prager on the radio, and after listening to him regularly for a few months, I realized, well, yeah, the most important thing is to be a good person. There's one God, one primary demand of his creation, that we be ethical and treat each other decently. Ethical monotheism, that's the way to go. I'm going to convert to Judaism. Judaism embodies ethical monotheism. The Torah shows you how to be a good person. And even though I'm sick, I can still be a good person. I can abstain from gossip. And I deliberately try to abstain from gossip. I would try to abstain from any hurtful words. I would try to not be a whiner or complainer when I was sick. I was very excited about ethical monotheism and Judaism and God, and it was that transcendent dimension of my new identity, that God thing, that Judaism thing, that Torah thing, that got me through those very dark years. But there was a problem. It didn't make me well. It didn't shift my health. I was still chronically ill, bedridden 20 hours a day, and so I figured I had to connect with other people, because I knew someone out there would have answers for my health problems. And so I just started placing a ton of singles ads, and women would come to visit me. I was living with my parents in an isolated part of Northern California, about 45 minutes north of Sacramento, up Interstate 80, and women would come to visit me. And very quickly, one thing led to another. So while at first for years there I was very strict, no masturbation, I wouldn't touch women, I wouldn't shake hands with women, I was like determined to lead a righteous life. I knew I'd had some sex and porn issues in my past, and now I was going to turn over a new leaf and was going to get holy through my performance of the Torah's commands. Jesus, this jerk. And then women started to visit me, and I kind of got sucked in, and then I was just off to the races. Like when I'd only been with one woman, my girlfriend at UCLA, it was like really special. But then I got with the second woman, and I thought, wow, this is fun. And it was so much fun, it was so pleasurable, that I couldn't stop there, and I just wanted to be with as many women as possible. And at the same time, I'm a new convert to Judaism, and I love the Torah. I want to be a good person, but I just can't abstain from women. So I very quickly connect with one woman who gets me to her psychiatrist, who gets me on a medication that helps me return to about 2/3 of normal health, and I'm about ready to return to a normal life. In 1994, I moved to Los Angeles to go to work for Dennis Prager, but he said he might have work for me. But I came out here, and it turned out he didn't have work for me. Also, maybe I just made a horrible impression on his chief of staff, Mark Wilcox, or even on Dennis himself. Like, women that I'd been with would call Dennis and complain that I was a pig. And so I was here in LA and kind of casting around what I was going to do, because I had hoped to work for Dennis Prager. And so I fall into the acting and modeling world, and it's so hypersexualized, it's so predatory, that I'm again just off to the races, just trying to get into bed with as many women as possible. And I'm very social in my first year in LA, fairly popular, and just hitting on so many women that, you know, even if 1 out of 10 says yes to me, I'm having the time of my life. But at the same time, I really want to do something about God and goodness. So I'm going to synagogue with Dennis Prager. I followed him to Stephen S. Wise Temple, to the Mountaintop Minyan, and I'm still a big Dennis Prager fan, listening to him on the radio every day. And I think ethical monotheism's the bee's knees, and still super excited about Judaism. And I'm not doing really well at the cooperative pursuit of acting and getting along with people. I've been thrown out of 3 acting schools by this point. And so at the last school, they tell me, look, you'd be better suited for a solitary endeavor like stand-up comedy. I think, oh, maybe I'll write a book. And so I said, I want to write a book on how to be a good person. Because I investigated the topic, and no one had written a book on how to be a good person. So I thought, Luke Ford, he's going to make his name, he's going to find his way in the world, he's going to write a book on how to be a good person. And I said, okay, Dennis Prager, he's given this 8-part series on how to be a good person. I just want to develop on some of the ideas that he sketched out in that cassette series, and I'll have a book. So I wrote to Dennis Prager for permission. And of course, Dennis Prager, didn't want Luke Ford taking his ideas and developing them into a book on how to be a good person. So they said, Luke, please hold off, don't do that. This is summer of 1995, and I've been in Los Angeles about 14 months, 15 months, 16 months. So I said, okay, I need a new topic, because I couldn't see writing on how to be a good person or writing on God and goodness without referencing Dennis Prager. So as Dennis Prager didn't want me to touch or build upon or develop any of his ideas, I felt like I needed to just leave that topic alone and move on to something else. So there was one other topic that I wanted to write about, and that was history of Saxon film. And that's the direction I went. But always in the back of my mind, I always wanted to get back to God and goodness. And so at the same time I'm writing my book on history of Saxon film, I'm getting deeper and deeper into Judaism. And I'm kind of split between those two pursuits, and I've noticed now I can't keep it out of my conscious mind that the good that I want to do, I don't do, and I'm not really proud of the way I'm living my life, and I realize that basically I'll give up anything for a chance with sex with an attractive young woman, and that kind of haunts me. Most of the time, it's not conscious how much I'm failing my ideals, but it happens at times, such as when I see Dennis Prager, because when I encountered Dennis Prager, he changed my life, and I told him he changed my life, and God and goodness, and yet I'm just banging everything in sight. And I'd see also Rabbi Yitzhak Adlerstein, who I used to have conversations with, 1991, 92, 93, 94. And he remembered me when I was like burning with fire for God and goodness and Torah and Yiddishkeit and Judaism. And now I'm a slut. And I'm writing a book on a history of sex in film, and my life is so incoherent that this is kind of tearing me apart. And so eventually I can't take the tension anymore, and so I just said, okay, forget it, I'm just going to write a book on Dennis Prager. And that way no one will ask me again, what does Dennis Prager think about what I'm writing on the porn industry? And that's exactly what happened. I lost all my friends because they saw it as the deepest betrayal was what I'd done to Dennis Prager. But at least nobody was bothering me anymore. What does Dennis Prager think about what I'm doing? So on the one hand, I found space and freedom for myself to develop completely outside of Dennis Prager's sphere. Everyone has a force field, and Dennis Prager puts forth a very powerful force field. Like, these charismatic leader figures are very common in Jewish life, and they develop a following, and they're just so powerful. See, I just let a black woman in, so never call me a racist. I stopped and I allowed a black woman into my lane. And so I got out of Dennis Prager's force field. Until then, I kind of felt stifled that I couldn't really leave the foundations of his teachings, or at least I didn't have the psychological strength to leave the foundations of his teaching, because the man had changed my life for the better. He was my hero, he was my substitute father figure. But now, by writing on the porn industry, at least I had freedom to move. But the split between the man I wanted to be and the man I was just kept widening. And my therapist, I had a therapist for about 10 years, she recalled in those early days of 1998 that she was afraid I was becoming a sociopath. I was making my living by blogging, so I didn't really have an editor. I was my own editor, and so I had so much room to speak, and that I was out of control. Yeah. So I was writing on the porn industry, still listening to Dennis Prager every day, but I was no longer in his force field. And I enjoyed enough success as a blogger that it inspired me, but on the other hand, my life didn't work. No decent woman would stick with me. And my family in 2000 paid for me to go back to Australia to see doctors of their choice, and one of them was a psychiatrist. And she saw me for 3 hours and came back with a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. And when I read her diagnosis, I realized it was correct. And she recommended I needed 10 to 15 years of psychotherapy to start to get my life back on track. And that was humbling. So I went back to psychotherapy, and I still just couldn't pull it together. Eventually, I quit writing on the porn industry, and it was such a relief. That was in August of 2007. My rabbi gave me an ultimatum. And so, either leave the synagogue or leave the porn industry behind. I gave up the porn industry completely. Ever since then, I've stayed in touch with nobody from the porn industry. And I thought, now I can be the man I want to be. And now I can just devote myself completely to Yiddishkeit. But I'd fractured so many relationships, I'd burned so many people, I'd disappointed so many people that it was hard for me to feel at home in Orthodox Judaism, because of my past behavior. I'd alienated myself, gross things I'd said, gross things I'd written, gross things I'd done, people I'd offended, the communities I'd disgusted. And so I didn't feel comfortable in Orthodox Judaism, and I kept pushing through, but the joy was gone. I pushed through into deeper and deeper Orthodox Judaism, but the joy was gone because of how I had poisoned that relationship, that community. My relationship with people in Orthodox Judaism was just so poisoned by my past behavior. And so I kept looking for ways to turn things around. So I used the Alexander technique, and I found some ease. And what else? I took up Kundalini yoga and found some ease from doing that, some relief. And I went back to psychotherapy. And in psychotherapy, my therapist said to me, do you think you're doing your Alexander technique, your Kundalini yoga, your Orthodox Judaism, all as ways to kind of hold off your underlying depression? And yeah, I was convinced that that was correct. So for me, a frontal assault of becoming a good person just never worked, because my own basic instincts, particularly for sex and love and affection, just kind of overrode everything else. And so either as a Christian, my desire is to be a missionary, my desire is to be a good Christian, and then a conversion to Judaism, and to be a good Jew. My desires to be a good Jew, or earlier in my life to be a good Christian, or to be a good person, just never worked. I was never able to pull it together because just my basic instincts would warp. All the grand things that I would espouse, my instincts would warp. So I never got any relief until I started going to 12-step meetings. And I read this, I saw an interesting video on understanding addiction. It's basically the fail to bond. We're wired to attach to other people, and when, because of early childhood imprinting, we don't learn to attach, we have to attach to something, so we learn to attach to either substances or processes. And I think that's what happened for me. So through working the 12-step program, admitting defeat from the way I was trying to live life, making a moral inventory of everybody I resented, and getting clear about what was my contributory role and making amends for the harms that I've done to other people, that enabled me to feel much greater ease and peace with other people. Doing daily check-ins, see if I was resentful or angry at anyone, and if so, what aspect of reality was I denying. So I learned to live at peace and ease with myself, with God, with other people, with the Orthodox Jewish community, other groups of people. And as I learned to live in connection with other people, with attachment to other people, as I learned to stay in my lane and not be seeking grandiosity and not be seeking constant narcissistic supply, not to be seeking admiration, I started getting along better with other people. And as I got along better with other people, I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want to act unethically. There's something about connecting with other people and forming bonds with other people and not wanting to disappoint people that it just naturally changes you. So, in my experience, a direct assault on trying to become a good person did not work. Did not work for me. On the other hand, learning to connect with other people, that worked. So, I think connection is the key to goodness. If you learn to connect normally with other people, you'll be a decent human being. And particularly as you move into the second half of life, it becomes weird to humiliate other people publicly. At least you just naturally develop empathy. So for me, I had to get away from the barriers to attachment, and I had to do that by, number one, getting clear how helpless I was before my basic instincts, such as self-assertion, such as grandiosity, such as my insatiable desire for attention, affection, romance, sexual romantic highs, admiration, feeling like a great guy, just becoming humble before the reality of the intensity of my basic instincts and how I kind of override decency and ethical values in the pursuit of my basic instincts. And that was the beginning. Then getting clear on my resentments and the role that I had played in my disappointing relationships, things that I'd done to hurt other people. Getting to see myself clearly. That was the beginning of turning around, learning to connect normally with other people, become a mensch. Bye-bye.